Welcome to Pilgrim's Rest Channel. The mission of this deep dive is to introduce the saints to spiritual books passed down through the ages, so that you, in your journey on the heavenly path, may find rest and supply here, and be strengthened anew. Today we are deep diving into a spiritual classic that approaches the pursuit of truth from, well, an entirely unique angle. It's powerful, maybe even a bit unsettling. Our focus is squarely on providing you, the pilgrim, with tools for clarity, maybe even strategic defense on your spiritual journey. The source material for our conversation today is C.S. Lewis's really seminal work, the Screwtape Letters, Devilish Correspondence on Spiritual Truth.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? This might be one of the most, insightful books ever written on spiritual strategy, I think. Lewis just flips the whole script. He lets us sort of eavesdrop on the opposition's planning meeting. We're not just studying temptation in theory. We're looking at the actual methods that tempters use. And that perspective, it really forces us, forces you, the listener, to confront your own spiritual reality, but through the eyes of the very forces trying to pull you down.
It's almost like finding the enemy's playbook, isn't it? Not just the big doctrines, but the specific sort of granular tactics used in the day-to-day trenches of life. Before we get right into those tactics, we should probably mention the author, C.S. Lewis, a huge figure in 20th century literature theology. He wrote this during World War II, actually. But what about the format? Why letters? Why is that so crucial here?
The structure is absolutely fundamental to how it works, to its usefulness. The whole book is just a series of letters. But they're written from a senior devil, Screwtape, to his nephew, Wormwood, who's a junior tempter just starting out. Wormwood's job is to corrupt one specific human. Lewis just calls him the patient. So the letters are basically Screwtape's very detailed, almost bureaucratic advice on how to chip away at the patient's faith and stop his spiritual growth.
Right, like a correspondence course in demonology, but aimed at teaching us about human spirituality. But why? Why choose this demonic point of view? Why not just write a straightforward book on morals? It feels counterintuitive. Why learn about holiness from the perspective that hates it?
Well, if you connect it to the bigger picture for you, the pilgrim, this devilish correspondence, acts like a powerful kind of spiritual X-ray. By showing exactly what the enemy sees as a win, what they fear, what they celebrate in our failures, we get this incredibly profound clarity about what spiritual health and virtue really are. You see, Screwtape's biggest fears are things like genuine love, real humility, persistence, and seeing those virtues defined by their opposite, by what the enemy targets, makes them feel incredibly tangible and frankly essential for anyone seeking growth. It really makes you ask, okay, which spiritual truths become crystal clear when you see them as the primary targets of attack?
That shift in perspective, that's the genius of it, I think.
Yeah.
So the main takeaway is using this frame to explain spiritual truth by dissecting the battlefield. But as you hinted, it's maybe not the dramatic battlefield we often imagine. What specific, maybe more subtle types of temptation come out through Screwtape's advice?
This is where it gets really deep. The book's real power is in its focus on the subtle stuff, the insidious temptations that pop up in just ordinary life, not the big dramatic sins we tend to fixate on. Screwtape actually tells Wormwood again and again to avoid anything too dramatic, like a major crime, because something like that could actually shock the patient back into serious repentance, maybe even deeper faith.
Oh, interesting. So the strategy isn't the big explosion, but the slow, steady erosion of character, of practice. If the dramatic stuff is out, what does Lewis show as the enemy's preferred weapon?
Distraction.
Yeah.
And just slow drift, those are absolutely paramount. Screwtape is a master at preventing the patient from actually living in the present moment. He recommends filling the patient's mind with anxieties about the future or maybe guilt and resentment about the past. I think it's letter 15 where he basically says the demons want humans living either in the past, which is effectively dead, or in the future, which is as yet non-existent. Lewis is showing us that real spiritual decisions, choices, they only happen right now in the present. So if we're distracted from the here and now, the enemy wins without us even realizing a battle was fought.
Wow, that really hits home for the modern pilgrim, doesn't it? I mean, in this age of constant connection, distraction is almost the default. It keeps you from quiet reflection, maybe not by tempting you to rob a bank, but just by making sure you always feel a bit too busy or slightly annoyed or maybe just comfortable enough to put off spiritual disciplines.
Exactly. And another really key strategy Screwtape pushes is about spiritual novelty. Fads. Lewis argues that consistency is really the antidote to that distraction we were just talking about. And Screwtape hates consistency. He wants the patient to be constantly hunting for the next big spiritual thing. Lewis portrays Screwtape advising Wormwood to keep the patient interested in new books, new preachers, new methods, just because they're new.
Ah, okay. So the danger isn't necessarily the content of the new thing, but the hunger for change itself. That constant switching leads to instability. So the spiritual seeker ends up kind of running from one trend to the next, but never actually putting in the hard work of daily discipline, deep devotion.
Precisely. That lack of being anchored, it prevents any real deep growth. But maybe the most cutting insight Lewis offers is on temptation related to pride, specifically false humility. Screwtape teaches that the most effective way to corrupt humility is actually to convince the patient that he has achieved it. So the patient looks at his own spiritual progress and thinks, wow, I'm actually becoming a truly humble person.
Oh, that's a trap within a trap. The second you congratulate yourself on being humble.
You become proud about your humility.
Exactly.
So how does Lewis expose that kind of circular self-deception?
Well, Screwtape explains that real humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. It's focusing on reality outside yourself, on God, on others. So if Wormwood can just get the patient constantly checking his internal spiritual thermometer, feeling pleased about his lack of pride, then the job's done. It's such a powerful lesson for you, the seeker. Real spiritual growth often feels less like some triumphant climb and more like quiet, maybe even mundane effort that's forgotten almost as soon as it's done.
This book really does feel like a manual on defense then. For you, the listener, reading Lewis isn't just, interesting. It's like getting a strategic map. It teaches you to recognize that subtle whisper of self-congratulation, or maybe that little decision to put off prayer just one more time. And to see that those small things might actually have a source, a deliberate intent behind them. Yes, absolutely. And we can't forget Lewis's focus on corrupting fellowship community. Screwtape knows the church is the main force opposing his side. But instead of some big frontal assault, he advises Wormwood to focus on getting the patient to notice and dwell on the flaws of the other people in his congregation.
Right, the classic church shopping problem, or maybe just focusing on the preacher's annoying habit, or the uncomfortable pews, or the little irritations from fellow members. Anything but the actual shared mission.
Exactly. Screwtape basically writes that if he can make the patient feel spiritually or maybe intellectually superior to his fellow believers, then the community becomes useless to him, even harmful. Lewis is really warning the pilgrim that focusing on the imperfections of the people around you is an incredibly effective tool for discouragement and ultimately isolation. And when we're isolated, that's when we're most vulnerable. The relevance for today's saints, young people, older people, it's just immense. It teaches that critical thinking about self-deception, about apathy, spiritual lukewarmness. These are the timeless issues that affect seekers in every single generation.
Okay, so we've really dug into the structure, this devil's lens, and some of the specific tactics Lewis exposes: distraction, false humility, messing with community. How do we pull all these dark lessons together into something actionable, some light for the person really wanting to grow on their spiritual path?
I think this kind of deep dive gives you that aha moment about the true nature of things like perseverance and gratitude and persistent love, precisely because Screwtape despises them so much. When Screwtape is advising Wormwood on how to destroy the patient's consistency, Lewis is actually, in reverse, defining what true persistence is for us. We learn that things like real spiritual joy, genuine, steady, patient effort, and maybe most importantly, just simple obedience, these are the very things that cause the most panic and distress in the enemy camp.
So Lewis gives us clarity by showing us the opposite of holiness in sharp detail. It equips the pilgrim with the understanding that the spiritual fight often isn't fought in those huge, dramatic moments, but in the quiet, maybe mundane choice to be grateful right now, or to be consistent in prayer tomorrow, or maybe just to overlook the small flaws of a fellow believer today.
Exactly. And maybe here's a final thought for you to carry forward from this. If we really understand what the darkness fears for something, if we know they genuinely panic when we commit to real charity, or persistent, quiet prayer, or just simple gratitude in this present moment, how should that knowledge fundamentally change the way we actually pray and serve and set our priorities tomorrow? The knowledge of the end days fear isn't just interesting. It's meant to arm the pilgrim for victory.
That is a powerful challenge to end on, definitely something to reflect on. We've seen how C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters uses its brilliant reverse perspective to reveal those specific, subtle, often insidious temptations that distract us from the heavenly path, hopefully offering you, the seeker, a vital manual for defense and clarity on your journey. Thank you for listening to Pilgrim's Rest Channel. See you next time, and we hope to see you again soon.